Magical Creatures' Dreams. Chapter 1. The Dreamer's Journal. The case sat open on the rickety wooden table, its interior illuminated by the warm glow of a dozen enchanted lanterns. From somewhere deep within, a series of melodic chirps echoed upward, followed by what sounded suspiciously like a small explosion and a puff of purple smoke. Newt Scamander merely smiled, making a quick note in his leather-bound journal before closing it with a decisive snap. "Almost time for the evening rounds," he murmured, glancing at the silver pocket watch dangling from a chain at his waist. "And tonight's a special one, isn't it, Pickett?" The small, green Bowtruckle peered out from behind Newt's collar, blinking sleepily before retreating back into the warmth of the magizoologist's coat. Newt chuckled, reaching into his pocket to retrieve a tiny vial filled with shimmering blue liquid. "I promise this is perfectly safe," he assured the reluctant creature. "Just a drop of Somnium Revelio potion to help me see what you dream about. Wouldn't that be fascinating for the research?" The wooden cabin that served as Newt's temporary home was situated on the edge of a dense Scottish forest, not far from Hogwarts' School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Though he was ostensibly here to consult with Professor Kettleburn about a particularly troublesome infestation of chisperfles in the school's magical equipment stores, Newt had a secondary mission in mind. For the past 6 months, he had been compiling what would eventually become a nocturnal guide to magical creatures, a companion volume to his renowned text that would focus exclusively on the sleeping habits, nighttime behaviors, and dream patterns of magical beasts. It was a largely unexplored field, combining magizoology with the nascent wizarding science of dream interpretation. Hagrid, the school's groundskeeper and care of magical creatures enthusiast, had been delighted to assist. In fact, Newt expected the half-giant to arrive any moment for tonight's expedition. As if on cue, 3 booming knocks rattled the cabin door. "Come in, Hagrid," Newt called, gathering his equipment into a worn leather satchel. The door swung open to reveal the massive silhouette of Rubeus Hagrid, who had to stoop considerably to enter the small cabin. "Even in, Newt," Hagrid greeted cheerfully, his beetle-black eyes twinkling with excitement. "Perfect night for dreamwitchin', if ye ask me. No moon to speak of, nice and dark." "Indeed," Newt agreed, adjusting his blue coat and slinging the satchel over his shoulder. "I've prepared everything we need. The Somnium Revelio potion is ready, and I've brought enough Nox vision glasses for both of us." "Brilliant," Hagrid exclaimed, lowering his voice immediately when Pickett let out an irritated chirp from Newt's collar. "Sorry 'bout that. The little feller ready fer his close-up." "Not particularly," Newt admitted with a wry smile. "But scientific discovery often requires a bit of persuasion. We'll start with him tonight, then move on to the Niffler den I discovered near the lake. After that, I thought we might check on the Hippogriff herd in the eastern clearing." Hagrid nodded enthusiastically. "Been leavin' out some treats fer 'em, just like ye said. They should be nice and settled by now." With preparations complete, Newt extinguished all but one lantern, which he handed to Hagrid. "Shall we begin?" The 2 men made their way back to the case, which Newt had positioned near the cabin's single bed. With practiced ease, he descended the magically expanded interior staircase, gesturing for Hagrid to follow. Inside the case, a vast menagerie of habitats stretched improbably in all directions. Newt led the way past a bubbling hot spring where several fire crabs slumbered, their jewel-encrusted shells glinting in the low light, and around a small desert enclosure where a pair of F-whoopers dozed with their heads tucked under vibrant wings. "Here we are," Newt finally announced, stopping before a tall, gnarled tree that looked as though it had been transplanted whole from an ancient forest. Among its upper branches, a small nest-like structure could just be seen, fashioned from twigs, leaves, and what appeared to be colorful buttons and scraps of fabric. "Picket, we've arrived at your home," Newt whispered, gently coaxing the Bowtruckle from his collar. "Would you mind terribly joining your family for the night while we observe?" Picket made a series of clicking noises that somehow managed to convey extreme skepticism. "I promise we'll be very quiet," Newt assured him, "and I've brought your favorite elderberry sap as a nightcap." At the mention of elderberry sap, Picket's demeanor changed. He cautiously extended a twig-like limb toward a tiny dropper bottle Newt produced from his pocket. "Just a drop," Newt said, carefully administering the sticky purple liquid. "There we go." After a moment's hesitation, Picket scurried up Newt's arm and leaped to the tree, climbing nimbly to the nest where 5 other Bowtruckles were already arranged in a cozy circle, their slender bodies rising and falling in the gentle rhythm of sleep. "Perfect timing," Newt whispered to Hagrid. "They've just entered their first sleep cycle." From his satchel, Newt retrieved 2 pairs of unusual spectacles with deep purple lenses that seemed to swirl with an inner mist. He handed one pair to Hagrid and donned the other himself. "Nox vision glasses," he explained. "They allow us to see in the dark without using wand light, which might disturb them, and when coupled with the Somnium Revelio potion." He carefully extracted the small blue vial from his pocket and used the dropper to place exactly 3 drops on the ground beneath the Bowtruckle nest. The drops of potion seemed to defy gravity, floating upward like tiny sapphire bubbles until they hovered just above the sleeping creatures. There, they expanded into a thin, transparent dome that encompassed the entire nest. "Now watch closely," Newt instructed, his voice barely audible. Within seconds, the dome began to fill with miniature scenes, like a 3-dimensional projection of the Bowtruckles' collective dreamscape. Tiny trees sprouted and grew within the blue haze, forming a magnificent forest in miniature. The dream trees were far larger and more elaborate than any real-world equivalent, their branches spiraling into impossible fractals and their leaves shimmering with a metallic luster. "Fascinating," Newt murmured, scribbling frantically in his journal. "They dream of an idealized version of their natural habitat. Notice how the dream trees incorporate elements of human-made objects. Those branches are shaped like fountain pens, and some of the leaves resemble pages from books." Hagrid leaned in, his enormous beard nearly touching the blue dome. "Look at that. They're climbing all over the place, faster than I've ever seen a move in real life." Indeed, within the dream, the Bowtruckles were darting about with incredible speed and agility, leaping between branches and swinging from vines that appeared to be made of golden thread. "In dreams, their physical limitations are removed," Newt observed. "They're experiencing a freedom of movement that would be impossible in their waking state." As they watched, the dream shifted. The forest remained, but now it was populated with enormous, slow-moving creatures that resembled humans, but with features distorted through the Bowtruckle's perception: elongated limbs, fingers like branches, and faces that were strangely blank except for enormous, kind eyes. "That's us," Hagrid whispered in amazement. "That's how they see us. More specifically, that's how they perceive their human caretakers," Newt corrected gently. "Notice how the dream humans are offering them what appear to be gigantic wood lice and pools of sap. These are nurturing figures in their dreamscape." For nearly an hour, they observed the shifting patterns of the Bowtruckles' dreams. Forests that transformed into elaborate wooden cities, migrations through canopies of sparkling leaves, and social gatherings where the tiny creatures performed what looked like intricate dances around glowing centers of light. "They're dreaming about wand cores," Newt realized suddenly. "Those glowing centers, they're wandwood with magical cores. Bowtruckles are naturally drawn to trees suitable for wand making. It seems this fascination extends to their dreams as well." Finally, the blue dome began to fade as the potion's effects wore off. Newt made a few final notes, sketching quickly to capture the last images before they disappeared entirely. Remarkable, he concluded, closing his journal with satisfaction. Exactly as I hypothesized, their dreams reflect both their natural behaviors and the adaptations they've made to life in captivity. There's a whole psychology here that's barely been explored. Hagrid's eyes were wide with wonder. Never thought I'd see anything like that. What's next on your list? Newt consulted his pocket watch. The Nifflers should be entering their deep sleep cycle soon. Let's make our way to their den. As they carefully moved away from the Bowtruckle tree, Newt paused, looking back at the peaceful nest. "Sleep well, my friends," he whispered. "Thank you for sharing your dreams." In his journal, beneath the night's observations, he added a personal note. Pickett and his kind dream of forests beyond imagining and of gentle giants who care for them. Perhaps, in the realm of dreams, they find a perfect balance between their wild nature and their chosen companionship with humans. More research needed, but tonight suggests that happiness, for a Bowtruckle, might be measured in the height of dreamed trees and the warmth of dreamed friendship. Chapter 2. The Niffler's Treasure. The lakeside burrow was deceptively small from the outside, just a neat hole tucked beneath the roots of an ancient oak tree, ringed with oddly shaped pebbles that gleamed suspiciously like lost sickles worn smooth by time and earth. Newt crouched before the entrance, his wand emitting the faintest blue glow as he carefully examined the ground. 7 distinct paw prints, he whispered to Hagrid, who was attempting, with limited success, to make himself smaller behind a nearby boulder. A mother and 6 kits, just as I thought. Perfect subjects for our study. Mighty territorial Nifflers, Hagrid cautioned, especially with young ones. Newt nodded, reaching into his pocket to produce what appeared to be a handful of dust. That's why I've brought this. Stand back a moment. With practiced precision, Newt scattered the glittering powder in a wide arc around the burrow entrance. As it settled, each particle began to emit a soft golden light, creating a perfect circle that pulsed gently against the darkness. Modified sleeping sand, he explained, infused with the scent of precious metals. When the Nifflers return from their nightly treasure hunt, they'll carry traces of it into their den on their paws. It won't harm them, just encourage them to sleep a bit more deeply than usual. Hagrid looked impressed. Clever, but how do we see inside the burrow without disturbing them? In response, Newt removed a small silver instrument from his satchel. It resembled a periscope crossed with a kaleidoscope, its surface engraved with tiny runes that moved and rearranged themselves in seemingly random patterns. "A burrower's beacon," Newt said. "Borrowed it from a colleague at the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. It creates a visual channel through earth and stone, allowing us to observe without intrusion." As they spoke, a rustling sound came from the underbrush nearby. Newt immediately extinguished his wand light and motioned for Hagrid to remain perfectly still. A moment later, a sleek black shape emerged from the darkness, its duck-like bill gleaming in the starlight. The mother Niffler moved with surprising grace for a creature whose pouch was visibly bulging with the night's acquisitions. Behind her, 6 smaller Nifflers scampered in a disorderly line, each carrying a single item clutched proudly in their paws: a bottle cap, a lost earring, a particularly shiny acorn, a silver thimble, a smooth piece of colored glass, and what appeared to be a muggle chess piece. "Their first treasures," Newt murmured, his eyes shining with the same enthusiasm that the Nifflers reserved for gold. "A crucial developmental stage. Each kit selects one special item to keep rather than surrendering it to the communal horde." The Niffler family crossed through the circle of sleeping sand without hesitation, small paws leaving glittering prints, as they disappeared one by one into the burrow. Newt waited patiently, counting to 100 under his breath before approaching. "Now then," he whispered, positioning the burrower's beacon carefully above the entrance. "Let's see what a Niffler dreams about, shall we?" He tapped the instrument 3 times with his wand. The runes glowed briefly. Then the top of the beacon opened like a flower, projecting a circular image into the air between Newt and Hagrid. It was as if they were looking down into the burrow through an invisible ceiling. The interior was far larger than the entrance suggested, a sprawling network of chambers and tunnels, the walls lined with an astonishing collection of shiny objects. Gold coins, jewelry, silverware, belt buckles, doorknobs, and countless unidentifiable trinkets formed a glittering tapestry. In the central chamber, nestled in a depression lined with soft fabric, which appeared to be made from several expensive silk handkerchiefs sewn together, the mother Niffler and her kits were already curled up in a contented pile. "Perfect timing," Newt said, extracting the blue vial of Somnium Revelio potion. He carefully placed 3 drops on top of the burrower's beacon, which absorbed and channeled the potion's magic downward into the burrow. A shimmering blue haze began to form above the sleeping Nifflers, not unlike the dome that had revealed the Bowtruckles' dreams. But where the Bowtruckles' dreamscape had been all verdant forests and graceful movement, the Nifflers' collective dream took on a very different character. Mountains of gold, literal mountains, towering peaks of coins, goblets, jewels, and every manner of shiny object imaginable, stretching as far as the dream eye could see. The Nifflers were sliding down these golden slopes, diving into pools of galleons, and tunneling through veins of glittering gemstones with expressions of pure ecstasy on their furry faces. "Good heavens," Newt murmured, furiously scribbling in his journal. "It's even more intense than I hypothesized. Their dream world is constructed entirely from their treasure-seeking impulse." "Makes sense, Don, Hagrid said with a chuckle. "Es what they live for, after all." "Yes, but notice the social dynamics," Newt pointed out. As they watched, the dream shifted subtly. The mother Niffler was now at the center of the largest treasure mountain, careful paws sorting through golden objects and selecting specific ones to present to each of her kits. There's a teaching element here. She's showing them how to identify the most valuable items. It's instinctual knowledge being reinforced through dreams. The dream kits received their treasures with visible delight, each immediately stashing their gift in their pouches, which expandable dream space allowed to hold improbably large objects. "Look at that one," Hagrid pointed to the smallest kit, who had wandered away from the others. "He's doing something different." Indeed, while the other Nifflers were focused on acquisition, the smallest one was arranging its treasures in intricate patterns, creating what looked like a miniature castle made entirely of shiny objects. "Fascinating," Newt whispered. "Creative expression through the medium they value most. I've observed similar behavior in waking Nifflers, but only rarely. This suggests the impulse is more common than we realize, perhaps suppressed by their stronger collecting instinct when awake." As they continued to observe, the dreamscape underwent another transformation. The mountains of treasure remained, but now they were interspersed with the shadowy forms of humans and other creatures, all frozen in tableau-like scenes. "They're memories of treasure sources," Newt realized. "Look, that's clearly a representation of a jewelry shop. And that one resembles the Great Hall at Hogwarts, with all those enchanted golden plates and goblets." Is that me?" Hagrid asked, pointing to a particularly large shadow figure who appeared to be inadvertently dropping shiny objects from enormous pockets. "It would seem you've made quite an impression," Newt confirmed with a smile. "They categorize and remember potential treasure sources, valuable information for them to share through their collective dreaming. For nearly an hour, They watched the shifting panorama of the Nifflers' dreams. Sometimes the scenes were straightforward treasure quests, with the family working together to unearth particularly magnificent hoards. Other times, the dreams took on more fantastical elements. The Nifflers grew wings made of golden feathers and soared over landscapes where rivers of silver flowed between jewel-encrusted banks. There's something almost profound about it, Newt mused, his quill pausing above his journal. We might dismiss their obsession with shiny objects as simple magpie-like behavior, but in their dreams, we see that these treasures represent something deeper: security, family bonds, creative expression, even a form of cultural memory. The blue haze began to thin as the potion's effects gradually wore off. Newt made his final notes, including several detailed sketches of the dream patterns he found most significant. "Ready to move on?" Hagrid asked as the projected image faded. "Almost," Newt replied. He reached into his coat pocket and produced 7 small objects, perfectly polished stones that caught the starlight like miniature mirrors. With careful movements, he placed them in a semicircle around the burrow entrance. "Dream tokens," he explained. "A small thank you for allowing us to observe their most private moments. They'll find them in the morning and add them to their collection." As they moved away from the Niffler burrow toward their next destination, Newt made one final entry in his journal. Nifflers dream in gold and silver, creating landscapes of abundance that reflect their waking obsessions. Yet within these materialistic dreamscapes, we find evidence of teaching, learning, creativity, and memory. The hidden complexity behind what many dismiss as simple creature avarice. Their treasures, both real and dreamed, are the medium through which they express their distinct cultural identity. In sleep, the Niffler reveals that there is far more to its character than the simple treasure hunter we observe by day. The eastern clearing where the Hippogriffs made their nightly roost was still a fair distance away. As they walked through the dark forest, guided by wandlight and Hagrid's intimate knowledge of the paths, Newt's mind was already racing with possibilities. "Hippogriffs are proud creatures in their waking hours," he said, half to himself and half to Hagrid. "I wonder if that pride manifests differently in their dreams. Will they soar higher, challenge greater foes, or perhaps there's a gentleness we never see, hidden beneath that fierce exterior?" Hagrid nodded sagely. "That's the thing about magical creatures, ain't it? Always got more layers than ye expect, like people that way." "Precisely," Newt agreed, his eyes bright with the thrill of discovery. "And that's exactly what I hope this research will demonstrate. The dream lives of magical creatures may help us understand their true nature in ways that waking observation never could." As they approached the edge of the forest, the trees began to thin, revealing glimpses of the star-filled sky above. Somewhere ahead, the soft sounds of feathers rustling and talons scraping against earth suggested that their next subjects were settling in for the night. Newt checked his pocket watch and smiled. Perfect timing once again. The night was still young and there were so many dreams yet to explore. Chapter 3: Hippogriffs in Flight. The eastern clearing was bathed in starlight when Newt and Hagrid arrived, moving with deliberate slowness to avoid startling its inhabitants. 6 hippogriffs were arranged in a loose semicircle, their magnificent forms creating dramatic silhouettes against the night sky. Some were already settling down, powerful legs folding beneath them and eagle heads tucking into feathered chests, while others remained vigilant, sharp eyes scanning the forest edge. "The herd patriarch is still awake," Newt whispered, indicating a particularly large hippogriff with gleaming silver feathers that transitioned to a dappled gray horse body. "We'll need to pay our respects before approaching further." Hagrid nodded in agreement. Stormwing's a proud one, even for a hippogriff, known him since he was a fledgling. The 2 men stepped into the clearing and stopped at a respectful distance. As one, they executed deep, formal bows, maintaining eye contact with Stormwing while showing proper deference. The great beast regarded them imperiously for several long moments before inclining his fierce head in acknowledgement. "Well done," Newt murmured as they straightened. "Now we wait for him to settle." They remained motionless as Stormwing conducted a final patrol of the clearing's perimeter, his talons leaving deep impressions in the soft earth. Finally, apparently satisfied with the safety of his herd, the magnificent creature returned to the center of the group and gracefully folded his legs beneath him. His wings, easily spanning 20 feet when fully extended, tucked neatly against his sides as he lowered his head, amber eyes slowly closing. "Perfect," Newt whispered after several minutes had passed. "They're entering their first sleep cycle now." With practiced care, Newt removed a different vial from his satchel, this one containing a pearlescent liquid that seemed to shift between silver and blue as it caught the starlight. "Modified Somnium Revelio," he explained to Hagrid. "The standard formulation works well for smaller creatures with relatively straightforward dream patterns, but hippogriffs are far more complex. Their dreams have multiple layers, part eagle, part horse, and something uniquely their own. This version will help us see those distinctions clearly." Unlike with the previous creatures, Newt did not simply release drops of the potion into the air. Instead, he uncorked the vial and released its contents with a gentle flick of his wand. The pearlescent liquid expanded into a fine mist that drifted across the clearing, settling like evening dew over the sleeping hippogriffs. "Now the viewing apparatus," Newt continued, extracting what looked like a silver coronet studded with tiny crystals from his seemingly bottomless satchel. "This is rather experimental, I should mention. Developed it myself after studying how pensive magic works." He carefully placed the coronet on his own head, then produced a similar one for Hagrid, which he had clearly modified to fit the half-giant's considerably larger dimensions. "These will allow us to perceive the dream images directly, rather than projecting them externally," Newt explained. "Much less intrusive for creatures as sensitive to magical disturbances as hippogriffs." "Ready," Hagrid nodded, settling the coronet somewhat awkwardly over his wild hair. "Ready as I'll ever be." "Somnium Revelio Percipio," Newt whispered, tapping his coronet with his wand before doing the same to Hagrid's. The effect was immediate and breathtaking. The physical world seemed to fade to a transparent overlay as another reality superimposed itself over the clearing. They could still see the sleeping hippogriffs, but now they could also see what was happening within their collective dreamscape. The dream clearing was the same, yet different, more vibrant somehow, the colors impossibly rich even in the darkness. The dream hippogriffs were soaring above it in formation, their wings leaving trails of starlight as they cut through the air. Leading them was Stormwing, his dream self even more majestic, his feathers gleaming like polished silver and his eyes blazing with inner fire. "Magnificent," Newt breathed, his voice sounding strangely distant through the dream overlay. "Look how they fly in their dreams, no constraints of physics or fatigue, pure freedom." The hippogriffs were indeed performing aerial maneuvers that would be impossible in waking life. Vertical dives, followed by spiraling ascents that defied gravity, wings folding completely before snapping open at the last possible moment, bodies twisting in complex patterns that seemed choreographed to music only they could hear. "It's like a dance," Hagrid observed, his normally booming voice hushed with wonder. "Precisely," Newt agreed, making quick notes in his journal despite never taking his eyes off the spectacle above. "A courtship dance, I believe. See how they pair off now." The dream hippogriffs had indeed begun to arrange themselves in pairs, their flight patterns becoming synchronized duets of graceful movement. Stormwing and a slightly smaller female with chestnut feathers executed a particularly complex sequence, their wings sometimes overlapping as they soared in perfect harmony. "Fascinating," Newt murmured. "The dream is reflecting pair bonding behaviors that they rarely display so openly when awake. Hippogriffs are incredibly private about their mating rituals. Few wizards have ever observed them directly." As they watched, the dreamscape shifted. The night sky darkened further, but now it was illuminated by what appeared to be a meteor shower, hundreds of streaming lights cutting across the blackness. The hippogriffs adjusted their flight to weave between these celestial trails, their movements becoming both playful and precise. "They're integrating real astronomy into their dream," Newt noted with excitement. "That meteor shower occurred last month. I observed it myself. They're recreating celestial events from memory and incorporating them into their dream flight." "Smart creatures, hippogriffs," Hagrid said with clear admiration. "Indeed, far more intelligent than most wizards give them credit for," Newt agreed. "And look there, the dream is shifting again." The scenery below the flying hippogriffs was transforming, the familiar clearing expanding to reveal vast landscapes beyond. Mountains, forests, lakes, and what appeared to be ancient ruins overgrown with vegetation. "Those places are hundreds of miles apart," Newt said, squinting at the dream geography. "Scotland, Wales, the Lake District. These are migration memories, the collective knowledge of generations of hippogriffs shared through dreams." Hagrid nodded slowly. "Makes sense. Youngsters need to know the migration routes, don't they? Even if this particular herd stays at Hogwarts year-round now." "Exactly. It's a form of cultural memory preservation," Newt said, his quill now moving frantically across the pages of his journal. "The instinctual knowledge remains important even when the behavior is no longer practiced." Remarkable. As they continued to observe, the dream underwent another transformation. Now the hippogriffs were no longer simply flying. They were engaged in what appeared to be aerial combat with shadowy, indistinct figures. "Predators," Newt whispered, "or at least the hippogriff's dream representation of them. See how the formation changes. They're moving into defensive patterns, protecting the younger members of the herd." The dream battle was intense but brief. The hippogriffs, led by a fiercely determined Stormwing, drove off the shadow creatures with powerful strikes from their talons and beaks. As the last of the threats retreated, the herd regrouped in a victory flight, their calls echoing with triumph. "Training through dreams," Newt observed. "The younger hippogriffs learn defensive tactics even in sleep. It's a perfect adaptation, practice without risk." The dreamscape shifted once more, becoming calmer. The hippogriffs were now gliding peacefully above an endless ocean, the moonlight reflecting off the water below, creating a mirror effect that made it seem as if they were flying between two star-filled skies. "This is extraordinarily beautiful," Hagrid murmured, his eyes suspiciously damp. "Indeed," Newt agreed softly. "I believe we're seeing something deeply personal now, not a memory or a training scenario, but a pure expression of how hippogriffs perceive beauty, the convergence of sky and sea, freedom above and mystery below." They watched in reverent silence as the dream hippogriffs soared through this liminal space, occasionally dipping low enough to touch the water with the tips of their wings, or rising high to pass through wispy clouds that dissolved around their powerful bodies. Gradually, the pearlescent potion began to wear off, the dream images fading to transparent ghosts before disappearing entirely. Newt and Hagrid removed their coronets, blinking as their perception returned fully to the physical clearing, where the hippogriffs continued to sleep peacefully. "That was," Hagrid seemed at a loss for words. "Extraordinary," Newt finished for him, carefully packing away the coronets. "And incredibly informative. The layers of hippogriff dreaming, from practical knowledge sharing to pure aesthetic joy, reveal a cognitive complexity that rivals our own." They moved quietly away from the clearing, careful not to disturb the sleeping creatures. When they were at a safe distance, Newt made his final notes in the journal by wandlight. "Hippogriffs dream as they live, with pride, passion, and purpose," he wrote. "But their dreams also reveal what they conceal in waking hours: vulnerability, gentleness, and a profound appreciation for beauty. In sleep, the duality of their nature, fierce eagle and noble horse, achieves a harmony that manifests as pure grace. Their dreams serve multiple functions: preserving ancestral knowledge, practicing survival skills, strengthening social bonds, and experiencing sensory pleasures beyond the constraints of physical reality. Perhaps most significantly, they dream collectively, sharing a common dreamscape that reinforces herd identity while allowing for individual expression. This communal dreaming may be the secret to their remarkable cohesion, as social creatures despite their famously proud and sometimes solitary nature." Closing his journal, Newt glanced at his pocket watch. "Still time for one more observation tonight," he said. "I've located a unicorn resting place not far from here, a mare with a new foal." Hagrid's eyes widened. "Unicorn dreams, that's... Well, that's something special, ain't it?" "Indeed," Newt agreed, his face alight with the anticipation of discovery. "And potentially the most challenging. Unicorns are among the most magically sensitive creatures in existence. Their dreams may be difficult to access without disturbing them." "If anyone can do it, you can," Hagrid said with confidence, clapping Newt on the shoulder with enough force to make him stumble slightly. Newt smiled, adjusting his coat. "Well, we shall certainly try. The secret, as always, is respect. Approach any creature with genuine reverence for its nature, and it may share its secrets with you, even the secrets of its dreams." With that, they set off deeper into the forest, guided by Newt's infallible sense of direction and Hagrid's intimate knowledge of the creatures that made these woods their home. Ahead of them, somewhere in the darkness, unicorns dreamed dreams of silver and moonlight waiting to be discovered. Chapter 4. Unicorn Lullabies. The forest grew denser as Newt and Hagrid ventured deeper into its heart, the trees standing closer together, and the underbrush becoming more tangled with each step. The canopy overhead thickened until only occasional glimpses of stars pierced the darkness. Yet despite the increasing gloom, there was a subtle change in the atmosphere, a sense of purity and calm that seemed to emanate from somewhere ahead. "We're getting close," Newt whispered, extinguishing his wand light completely. "From here, we proceed without magic. Unicorns can sense even the smallest spell, and we don't want to disturb them." Hagrid nodded, moving with surprising delicacy for someone of his size. Years spent in the forest had taught him how to place his enormous feet with minimal disturbance to the undergrowth. "How are we going to see 'em without light?" he asked in a barely audible rumble. In response, Newt reached into his pocket and extracted what appeared to be 2 small silver acorns. He handed one to Hagrid. "Moon seeds," he explained. "Not magical in the traditional sense, they're natural repositories of moonlight. Hold it in your palm, but don't squeeze." As Hagrid accepted the tiny object, it began to emit a subtle silvery glow that illuminated their immediate surroundings without the harsh directness of wand light. The light seemed to belong in the forest, harmonizing with the natural darkness rather than fighting against it. "They only shine in the presence of pure-hearted intent," Newt added. "A unicorn can't be offended by a light source that only works for those who mean no harm." They continued forward, guided by the gentle illumination of the moon seeds, until Newt raised a hand in silent signal to stop. Ahead, barely visible through the trees, was a small clearing carpeted with soft moss and tiny white flowers that seemed to glow with their own inner light. In the center of this enchanted space lay a unicorn mare, her pearlescent body gleaming even in the darkness. Curled against her side was a golden foal, its tiny horn just a bump on its forehead, its delicate legs tucked beneath it in sleep. The mare's eyes were closed, her breathing deep and regular, but her ears flicked occasionally toward the forest sounds. "Perfect," Newt breathed, the word barely a movement of lips. "They're both asleep. Now comes the truly delicate part." From his seemingly bottomless satchel, he produced a container unlike any he had used before. A crystal vial with a stopper made from what appeared to be a unicorn hair. "Somnium Revelio for unicorns must be absolutely pure," he explained in barely more than a breath of sound. "This potion is distilled from morning dew collected from lily petals during the spring equinox, with one freely given hair from a unicorn's tail as the catalyst. Even the vial must never have contained anything else." With exquisite care, Newt removed the stopper and held the vial up to his lips. Instead of pouring out the contents, he gently blew across the opening, creating a fine mist of droplets that carried on his breath toward the sleeping unicorns. The droplets caught the moonseed's light as they traveled, creating a momentary constellation of tiny stars that settled invisibly over the magical creatures. "Now for our observation method," Newt continued, returning the empty vial to his satchel. "Unicorn dreams are too pure for direct viewing. Attempting to enter their dreamscape would corrupt it with our human consciousness. Instead, we must listen." He produced two objects that resembled delicate silver seashells, handing one to Hagrid. "Dream shells," he whispered. "Hold it to your ear. It will translate the unicorn's dreams into a form we can comprehend without intrusion." As Hagrid carefully positioned the dream shell near his ear, his eyes widened in wonder. Newt did the same, and immediately understood his companion's reaction. Music. The unicorn's dreams were manifesting as the most exquisite music imaginable, notes so pure they seemed to bypass the ear entirely and speak directly to the soul. It began as a single crystalline tone, like the highest string of a violin played with perfect precision, but then expanded into a complex melody that no human instrument could produce. "Extraordinary," Newt whispered, his eyes closing involuntarily as he focused on the ethereal sound. "The mare is dreaming of running. Can you hear the rhythm of hoofbeats woven into the melody? And there, that counterpoint of higher notes, that's the foal's presence in her dream." Hagrid nodded, his beetly black eyes glistening with emotion in the moonseed's light. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard," he managed, his voice thick. They stood in reverent silence, allowing the unicorn's dream music to wash over them. The melody shifted constantly, maintaining its fundamental purity while exploring variations that seemed to reflect different aspects of the unicorn's experience, sometimes playful and light, reminiscent of a spring morning, sometimes profound and almost melancholy, like moonlight on undisturbed snow. "The dream shells are translating pure emotion into sound," Newt explained after several minutes had passed. "Unicorns don't think in images or words as we do. Their consciousness is a direct experience of the world's underlying harmony, what some might call magic in its purest form." As they listened, a new element entered the dream music, a series of gentle tones that repeated in a consistent pattern. "A lullaby," Newt realized with quiet excitement, scribbling hurriedly in his journal while keeping the dream shell pressed to his ear with his shoulder. "The mare is singing to her foal within the dream. She's reinforcing their bond even in sleep." The lullaby grew more complex, incorporating elements that seemed ancient and instinctual, musical phrases that might have been sung by unicorns for thousands of years, passed from mother to foal across countless generations. "This is knowledge transfer," Newt whispered. "Through this dream song, she's teaching the foal everything it needs to know, how to find the purest water, which plants are safe to eat, which parts of the forest to avoid. It's all encoded in the melody." Suddenly, there was a subtle shift in the music, a new alertness entering the rhythm. Newt's eyes snapped open to see the mare's ears twitching more actively, though she hadn't awakened. "She senses something," he breathed, gesturing for Hagrid to be absolutely still. The dream music adopted a more cautious tone, the notes becoming shorter and more precisely spaced. Then, without warning, a discordant element entered, strange, jarring tones that seemed fundamentally wrong against the unicorn's natural harmony. "A predator in her dream," Newt explained, his expression grave. "Something threatening. Listen to how she's instructing the foal. Those repeated phrases are directions, safety measures." The dream lullaby had indeed transformed into something more urgent, still beautiful, but now interwoven with clear patterns that repeated with increasing emphasis. "She's teaching the foal to flee, to hide its light, to remain silent," Newt translated, his ear pressed firmly to the dream shell. "This is survival knowledge being passed down through dream song." Gradually, the discordant elements receded as the mare's dream self apparently led her foal to safety. The music returned to its earlier serenity, though perhaps with a new depth that hadn't been present before, wisdom gained through overcoming danger. "Fascinating," Newt murmured. "Even in dreams, they're constantly preparing, constantly teaching. And notice how the dream didn't end in confrontation. Unicorns almost never dream of violence, even in self-defense. Their dreams focus on evasion, protection, preservation of purity." They continued listening as the dream music evolved once more. Now it took on an almost playful quality, rapid runs of notes that danced and spiraled around each other. "The foal is more prominent in the dream now," Newt noted. "See how its musical motif has grown more confident. The mare is dreaming of its future strength, its growth." For nearly an hour, they stood motionless, absorbed in the unicorn's dream song. Through the dream shells, they witnessed musical representations of cosmic events, the changing seasons, the movement of stars, the ancient rhythms of the earth itself. All of it filtered through the unicorn's pure perception, translated into sound of heartbreaking beauty. Eventually, the dream music began to fade, signaling that the potion's effects were wearing off. Newt and Hagrid reluctantly lowered their dream shells, blinking as if awakening from a trance themselves. "We should leave them in peace now," Newt whispered, carefully storing the dream shells in his satchel. "We've been granted an incredible privilege tonight." They retreated with the same care they had used in their approach, not speaking until they were well away from the unicorn's clearing. When they finally stopped to rest, Hagrid's expression was thoughtful. "Never knew anything could sound like that," he said quietly. "Made me feel, I dunno, like everything was right with the world just for a bit." Newt nodded, making his final notes by the light of his narrow-stored wand. "That's the essence of unicorn magic," he replied. "They don't just exist in our world, they remind us of what our world could be. Their dreams reflect that purity of potential." In his journal, he wrote, "Unicorn dreams manifest as music of transcendent beauty, a direct expression of the harmonic principles underlying all magic." Through dream songs, mothers teach their foals essential knowledge of both practical and spiritual nature. The unicorn dreamscape contains no images as we understand them, but rather pure emotional and magical resonances that the dream shells translate into sound our human minds can comprehend. Most remarkable is the continuity between waking and dreaming states for unicorns. Unlike most creatures, they seem to experience no fundamental division between the two conditions, suggesting a level of magical integration we can barely comprehend. In the unicorn's dream music, I heard echoes of what magic itself might sound like if given voice. As they made their way back toward the edge of the forest, the night sky beginning to lighten with the first hint of dawn, Newt felt a profound sense of satisfaction. Three very different magical species, three unique approaches to dreaming, each revealing aspects of creature consciousness that daylight observation could never uncover. "Just one more to visit before sunrise," he said, checking his pocket watch. "And perhaps the most fascinating of all, from a research perspective." "What's that?" Hagrid asked, ducking beneath a low-hanging branch. Newt's eyes twinkled with excitement in the growing light. "A creature that challenges our very definition of sleep and dreaming. The Mooncalf's dance begins only as the sun threatens to end it, a dream enacted in the world between night and day." Hagrid grinned, his momentary fatigue forgotten. "Lead the way, then. Wouldn't miss it for all the gold in Gringotts." Chapter 5: The Mooncalf's Dance. The sky was shifting from deepest indigo to a softer violet as Newt and Hagrid emerged from the forest onto a gentle hillside. The remaining stars were fading, retreating before the advancing dawn, but the moon still hung low in the western sky, a perfect silvery crescent that seemed to smile down upon the landscape. "Perfect timing," Newt breathed, his fatigue forgotten as he surveyed the hilltop meadow before them. "See there, the circular patterns in the grass." Hagrid squinted at the hilltop, where indeed the tall grass had been flattened in several overlapping rings. "Mooncalf dancing grounds," he confirmed with a nod. "Been a while since I've seen 'em up close." "They'll emerge any moment now," Newt said, settling himself behind a large rock at the meadow's edge and gesturing for Hagrid to do the same. "Mooncalves only come to the surface during the full moon, but what few wizards realize is that they also emerge at dawn following the last crescent moon of each season. It's a transitional period in their life cycle, when they're neither fully awake nor truly asleep." "Like sleepwakin," Hagrid suggested, crouching with surprising grace behind his own concealing boulder. "Something like that," Newt agreed, rummaging in his satchel. "But far more purposeful. Mooncalves exist in a state we might call waking dreams during these dawn dances. It's a communal ritual that reinforces their society's structure while allowing them to process experiences from the previous season." He extracted a curious instrument from his bag, something like a brass telescope with multiple lenses arranged in a rotating collar. "No potions needed for this observation. Mooncalves' dream dances are fully externalized, visible to anyone patient enough to watch. But this oneiroscope will help us perceive the magical emanations their movements generate." As if on cue, the ground near the center of the hillside began to tremble slightly. Small mounds appeared in the soft earth, rising like miniature volcanoes before splitting open to reveal narrow tunnels. And then, one by one, they emerged. Mooncalves were among the strangest creatures in the wizarding world, bulbous, smooth-skinned beings with enormous feet and heads that seemed too large for their spindly bodies. Their eyes were huge and protuberant, reflecting the moonlight like liquid silver. As they climbed fully onto the surface, blinking in the pre-dawn light, they moved with an otherworldly grace that belied their awkward appearance. "Beautiful," Newt whispered, raising the oneiroscope to his eye. "Absolutely beautiful." There were 7 mooncalves in total, ranging from a tiny juvenile no larger than a house cat to a patriarch, whose silver-stippled hide suggested considerable age. They arranged themselves in a circle facing inward, their huge eyes half-lidded in what appeared to be a trance-like state. "The dream dance begins in silence," Newt narrated softly as Hagrid leaned forward in fascination. "Watch their feet. The rhythm starts there." Indeed, the mooncalves had begun to tap their enormous feet against the ground in perfect unison, creating a gentle percussion that seemed to resonate through the hillside. The rhythm was complex, not a simple 4/4 beat but something that shifted and evolved, containing patterns within patterns. "They're communicating through vibration," Newt explained, adjusting the oneiroscope's lenses, setting the foundation for their shared dream space. "Ah, and now it truly begins." The largest mooncalf had raised its spindly arms, the moonlight catching on the fine silver bristles that lined them. It executed a series of fluid movements that resembled conducting an invisible orchestra. In response, the others began to sway, their bodies moving in perfect coordination while their feet continued the complex rhythm. "Look through here," Newt offered, handing the wonderoscope to Hagrid. "Tell me what you see." Hagrid pressed the instrument to his eye and gasped softly. "Blimey," he breathed. "There's colors, patterns in the air around 'em, all swirling together like—" "Exactly," Newt confirmed, taking notes in his journal. "Those are dream emanations, the collective unconscious of the Mooncalf colony made visible through their ritualized movements. They're literally dancing their dreams into being." Through the wonderoscope, the dance took on an entirely new dimension. Each movement of a mooncalf's limbs left trails of luminous color in the air, patterns that intertwined with those created by the others, forming complex three-dimensional tapestries of light that hung suspended above the dancers. These patterns were not random but clearly symbolic, creating and dissolving images that told a story. The first sequence always recounts their seasonal migration, Newt explained as they took turns with the wonderoscope. "See how those spiraling patterns mimic their underground tunneling, and those pulsing spheres represent the different soil layers they've traversed. They're mapping their journey through dream dance." As they watched, the dance evolved, becoming more elaborate. The mooncalves began to pair off, except for the eldest who remained in the center, directing the movements with increasingly intricate gestures. The dream patterns visible through the wonderoscope grew more complex, showing what appeared to be encounters with other creatures, astronomical events, and environmental changes. "Remarkable," Newt murmured, scribbling frantically while still trying to watch. "They're processing everything their colony has experienced since the last seasonal transition. It's a form of collective memory consolidation, ensuring that every individual shares the same knowledge base." The smallest mooncalf, the juvenile, sometimes faltered in the more complex sequences, its movements slightly out of sync with the others. When this happened, the nearest adult would adjust its own dance to guide the youngster, helping it integrate into the pattern. "They're teaching it," Hagrid observed quietly, "making sure it learns the steps." "Yes, but it's far more than just a dance lesson," Newt explained. "Through these movements, they're literally transferring memories and instinctual knowledge directly into the juvenile's developing consciousness. It's an extraordinary form of education, abstract concepts made physically tangible through ritualized movement." As the dance continued, the patterns visible through the wonderoscope began to shift toward representations of celestial bodies. The sun, moon, and stars rendered in glowing dream light above the dancers. The movements became more vertical, the mooncalves rising onto their hind legs and reaching upward as if trying to touch these astral projections. "Now they're moving into prognostication," Newt said, his voice hushed with excitement. "Mooncalves have an innate sensitivity to cosmic cycles. This part of the dream dance is their collective prediction of celestial events for the coming season." The dream patterns above showed the moon waxing and waning in accelerated sequence, interspersed with meteor showers, planetary alignments, and what appeared to be solar flares. The dancers responded to each projection with specific movements that seemed to embed these predictions into their bodily memory. "This is why mooncalf dung is so valuable in magical herbology," Newt explained. "Their digestive systems are attuned to these cosmic rhythms, producing fertilizer that helps plants synchronize with celestial events for maximum magical potency." By now, the eastern sky had brightened considerably, the first direct rays of sunlight about to crest the horizon. The mooncalves' movements became more urgent, the dream patterns above them intensifying in brightness as if in competition with the approaching day. "The finale," Newt whispered. "This is the true purpose of the whole ritual." The 7 mooncalves suddenly converged in the center of their circle, pressing close together with their heads touching, forming a living sculpture that resembled a strange, many-limbed flower. Their feet still moved in that complex rhythm, but now in perfect synchronicity. Above them, all the dream patterns merged into a single, blindingly intense sphere of light that contained all the colors they had previously generated. Through the woniroscope, Newt and Hagrid could see this sphere beginning to contract, condensing into an ever smaller point of brilliance. As the first ray of sunlight struck the hilltop, the sphere collapsed entirely, shooting downward into the huddled mooncalves in a flash so bright it left afterimages even through the protective lenses of the instrument. And then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the mooncalves separated, turned, and disappeared one by one back into their tunnels. The last to leave was the eldest, who paused at the entrance to its burrow and turned its enormous silver eyes directly toward Newt and Hagrid's hiding place. It blinked once deliberately, then vanished underground. "Did you see that?" Hagrid whispered, awestruck. "It knew we were here the whole time." "Of course," Newt said, smiling as he finally lowered his journal. "Mooncalves are far more aware than most wizards give them credit for. They tolerated our observation because we remained respectful and distant." But what was that last bit? That flash of light going into them? "The culmination of the dream dance," Newt explained, carefully packing away the woniroscope. "They spent hours externalizing their collective memories, processing them through movement, and then reintegrated the entire experience back into their consciousness. It's a perfect cycle of dream expression and absorption." As they stood, stretching their stiff limbs after the long night of observation, the sun rose fully above the horizon, bathing the hillside in golden light. Where the mooncalves had danced, the grass now grew in complex spiral patterns, already visibly taller and more vibrant than the surrounding vegetation. "Dream fertilized," Newt noted with satisfaction. "Those patterns will remain visible for months, a physical record of their dance inscribed on the landscape itself." Back at the edge of the forest, Newt made his final entry in the research journal, his handwriting slightly less precise after a full night without sleep, but his enthusiasm undiminished. "The Mooncalf's dawn dance represents perhaps the most integrated relationship between dreaming and waking consciousness I have ever observed in any magical species. They externalize their collective unconscious through ritualized movement, creating visible dream patterns that serve multiple functions simultaneously: knowledge transfer, memory consolidation, astronomical prediction, and social cohesion. Unlike other creatures, who experience dreams as internal phenomena during conventional sleep, mooncalves have evolved a system where dreams become a shared external reality that can be manipulated, examined, and finally reabsorbed with perfect awareness. This suggests that the conventional boundary between dreaming and waking states is far more permeable than we have assumed, perhaps more a limitation of human perception than an absolute division in the nature of consciousness itself. Closing the journal with a satisfied sigh, Newt turned to Hagrid. "Well, my friend, I believe our night of dream observation has been a remarkable success. 4 very different creatures, 4 unique approaches to the dream world, each providing pieces of a larger puzzle about the nature of magical consciousness." Hagrid nodded, his beard catching the early morning sunlight. "Gonna make a fantastic book, this will. Magical Creatures' Dreams. Can I get a signed copy when it's done?" Newt laughed, clapping the half-giant on his massive shoulder. "You'll receive the very first one, I promise. After all, without your knowledge of the forest and its inhabitants, half these observations would have been impossible." As they made their way back toward Hagrid's hut for a well-deserved breakfast, Newt's mind was already organizing the night's discoveries into chapters and illustrations. The Bowtruckles dreaming of idealized forests, the Nifflers creating mountains of imaginary treasure, the Hippogriffs soaring through remembered skies, the unicorns' dream music, and the Mooncalves dancing their collective unconscious into temporary reality, each revealing aspects of magical life that daylight observation could never uncover. "You know, Hagrid," he said thoughtfully as the gamekeeper's cabin came into view, "I believe we've only scratched the surface. Just imagine what we might learn from the dreams of phoenixes, dragons, or even merpeople." Hagrid's eyes lit up at the possibilities. "You're welcome back any time, Newt. The creatures of Hogwarts seem to trust you almost as much as they trust me. Almost," he added with a wink. Newt smiled, patting the journal in his pocket where a night's worth of remarkable observations were safely recorded. "I think this is the beginning of a much larger project," he said. "After all, if we truly want to understand magical creatures, we need to know not just how they live, but how they dream." The rising sun cast their long shadows across the dew-covered grass as they walked, two figures united by their respect for the magical world's most fantastic inhabitants. And now, by the privilege of having glimpsed the dreams that filled their sleeping minds. Behind them, under hill and forest, burrow and nest, the creatures of Hogwarts continued to dream, each in their own unique way, their unconscious magic weaving unseen wonders in the quiet hours between darkness and light.